Hello, my name is Alec, and welcome back to the workshop here at All Design House. Today I have a super interesting project on the table. I found this chair through a local estate cleaner, and if you don't know what an estate cleaner does, essentially their job is to go through the belongings of someone who has passed, and after their family members have kind of gone through and taken what heirlooms and sentimental objects they wish to keep, this estate cleaner goes through and sells, donates, or trashes the rest. Now, according to that estate cleaner, this piece sat through an entire estate sale with no offers, and that may be because no one knew exactly what it was. I mean, you can see just how bad of shape this chair is in. So after sitting through this estate sale, the cleaner was ready to take this piece to the landfill, but fortunately for us, they reached out to us first, and I couldn't be happier they did. I mean, look at this thing. I could instantly recognize that this is a Savonarola style armchair, but what's weird about this example is that it's constructed entirely out of iron and brass, where most of the examples I have seen have been made out of some kind of hardwood. So needless to say, when they reached out and said it was headed to the landfill, I couldn't get in my car fast enough. And once I finally got the chair into our workshop, I could tell it is a remarkably made piece. I mean, it's built entirely out of wrought iron on the frame, these beautifully turned brass accents, and about the thickest leather slings I have seen. I mean, they don't really make leather, they can't process leather that thick anymore. And now you can see just how much dust is coming off this thing. It's definitely been through its paces, and that kind of harkens to one of the biggest questions I have, which is how old this piece exactly is. I know it's a well-made piece, and I know that most Savonarola chairs came from Italy, but the question remains just how old it is. I mean, you can see this clamp mark on the leather when the chair was originally made, and I even tried to see if I could find that original C-clamp based off the impression it left to discern its approximate age. And even though it didn't work here, it just shows the lengths that we will go sometimes to figure out the provenance or age of a piece. Now, this chair is an excellent example of why you should always condition your leather furniture, leather bags, leather boots. When you don't condition the leather, it loses its natural oils and becomes like this. this rock hard material that becomes brittle and stiff and extraordinarily difficult to work with. So don't forget to condition your leather. And just when I thought I'm beginning to finally understand what this chair is, I realized there's something weird about the paint on this chair's frame. Here I am taking some fine steel wool coated in WD-40, and I'm going to clean off the rust on this frame. But what I'm noticing is that what I thought was rust is actually red paint. And not only is it red paint, but it is actually red clay bull. And do you know what that means? This gold paint is not gold paint, but actually gold leaf. I'm guessing 22 karat gold leaf, and most of it's been lost to time, but still, how cool is that? Now, this fact, coupled with some other points of evidence, like the leather and the fact that the frame was sewn by hand, lets me place this chair as having been made in Italy, likely at the end of the 19th century. So this is an Italian Savonarola chair with a gold gilded frame made over a century ago. I mean, that's exactly why I do the things that I do, is to bring pieces like this back to life. So here, I'm going to seal this frame up a little bit to limit corrosion, and for this, I'm going to use boiled linseed oil. I learned this trick from an old mechanic who used to work on vintage bicycles, and what he taught me is that if you spread a thin layer of boiled linseed oil over the metal, as it dries, it polymerizes, placing a thin, strong protective layer between the metal and the elements, just to protect it for generations to come. And an added benefit of adding this boiled linseed oil is it kind of creates this beautiful, nice, wet sheen and incorporates some richness into the gold that's on the chair's frame, kind of making it pop out more than it would if it was just left alone. Okay, so now that we've cleaned the frame, we can finally focus on the leather. And as you could probably tell, the original leather on this chair is super thick. I mean, honestly, probably the thickest I've seen. I looked through our stock of leather, and luckily, I found a close match in this vintage English bridle leather. Whenever I come across old leather workers letting go of their leather stock or closing out their business, I always try to pick up as much material as I can for projects just like this one. And don't let anyone tell you that pattern cutting is easy, because believe me, it is not. I am taking this old, distorted, bent leather that has cracked and shrunk and expanded and transmitting those measurements to this new leather. And this part can only be done correctly after years and years of experience, which I am thankful to have, especially at this moment. Now, if you notice, I'm not going to cut this thick bridle leather in just one pass. One tip I give to anyone starting to work with thicker leather is to cut with multiple shallow passes. This will give you way more control of your cut and allows you to get a much cleaner and straighter end result. And depending on who you ask, this method of cutting will actually keep your blade sharper for longer. What I'm placing onto the workbench here is actually liner leather, which is a nice thin leather that you usually find on the inside of a bag or on the facings of a wallet, something where you have a nice thick leather on the outside and you're trying to face and finish off the inside. And what I'm going to do is use this to replicate the edge binding that was on the original chair. And what this will do is just give a neat and tidy edge profile to the new leather and stay closer to the true authenticity of the piece. Now, I'm going to use my awl to mark a glue line about a ½ inch from the sides on my newly cut leather. And what this does is it gives me a good guide of where to glue and where to line up that new liner leather when we go to put it back together. What I'm going to use here is a water-based contact adhesive, or a contact cement. I believe this product is called Renia Aqualim. It's a really good water-based contact adhesive, and once I have both surfaces of the leather thoroughly glued, I'm going to hammer the two pieces together to further cement these two pieces together on a molecular level. And what's amazing about this contact adhesive is once you hammer those two pieces together and let it dry properly, those two pieces of leather are extraordinarily difficult to pull apart. And on top of this, we're going to take these two pieces of leather over to our sewing machine to fully stitch these two pieces together. Okay, so now I have these two pieces of leather cemented together. I can finally take them over to my sewing machine. And I get asked a lot about the type of sewing machine I use, and this is an old FA 545 walking foot sewing machine. It is an industrial sewing machine, and it is outfitted here with a specialty leather needle and a thick thread. And this is fairly thick vegetable tan leather, and as you can see, it's just cutting right through it. I am not sponsored by Pfaff. This is my one and only walking foot sewing machine, but I could not recommend this machine enough. I mean, it's extraordinarily versatile, and the amount of torque it has is really just impressive. Now, I thought about reusing the original arm pieces, but they've really just lost all of their original oils and as a result have become rock hard. So we're actually going to cut some new arms out of the leftover material from the seat and backrest. So here I am once again marking my glue line on this leather, and once the contact adhesive dries clear, I can press these two pieces together. And what I'm doing here is I'm using my awl to scratch in these nice cross hatches into the leather, into that margin we just used for our glue line. And what this does is you're scratching up that surface and providing more surface area for these two pieces of leather to really bond together once we apply the contact adhesive. Now, once this contact adhesive dries clear, I can press these two pieces together. Then I'm cutting off the excess with a nice sharp chisel. And I'm doing this because if I left it, those variances in the edge would transmit to the finished edge with the liner leather. So it's better to clean everything up now so we don't run into that problem down the line. In here, I'm applying a similar type of finish with the liner leather, but it's a little bit trickier than the seat and backrest, rounding around these corners, but I'll show you what my plan is to work those out. This is probably one of my most essential tools to have in the workshop. This is a cheap little dental pick, and it is an essential piece of equipment as it allows me to precisely lay out these pleats and kind of massage out those folds and creases before we go to the sewing machine to get a final stitch in. And I find that using a specialty tool like this really allows me to put a really intentional finish on this armrest and just makes it that much cleaner of an end result. And when we take these armrests to the sewing machine, this is where we are really testing the limits of this machine. I mean, this is about 3/8 inch of vegetable tanned leather, and you can see it's slicing right through it. I swear this isn't an ad, I just can't recommend this machine enough. Any kind of other industrial walking foot machine you can find for pretty affordable, especially if you look for a vintage one. This FOF 545, they can get up there in price, but if you keep an eye out and if you find one that you can fix up and oil up, these machines were really built to last and are going to do you really well. Now that the armrests are complete, I can now test fit them onto the iron armrests. And this leather is actually so stiff that I need a little assistance to press out the leather before I slide it onto the angle iron. This is not unlike what you might do if you are doing leather work for a wallet or a bag, and use a bone folder to kind of massage out those seams. And as I slide this piece on, you can see it actually is molding to the shape of the iron, making this a perfectly snug fit. If you remember when we disassembled the chair, there were a few pieces of wood that fell out, some old shims, and that was a product of the leather being poorly fit. So this new leather, having this nice tight fit on here, just ensures as this chair sees use, these armrests are going to stay in place and not shift around. Okay, for the seat and backrest, I'm going to need to get a little bit creative. So this is a trick I learned from an old leather worker who used to make a lot of gun holsters and knife sheaths. And the trick is to get the leather wet and let it really soak up in some nice warm water. And that will get it nice and pliable, pliable enough to bend it around some really sharp angles. And this angle iron that is on the backrest is the definition of a sharp angle. So once it's soaked, I can clamp it in place and let it dry for a bit. And as it dries, it will actually stay in that shape, allowing me to remove it and work with it outside of the chair. This is admittedly a bit awkward, as I'm going to attempt to sew this backrest in place using these brackets, which makes it a little difficult to move through the machine, but I think I can make it work. Once that's done, we can now move on to the other side. And similar situation, but now we have two angled armrests that we now have to get a bit creative to make it move through the sewing machine in a way that I don't damage my sewing machine or dang up my table too much. Now, for the seat, I am following the same principle, soaking the leather and clamping it around this oak dowel to form the general bend and shape. So this is not going to be easy, as there is no opportunity to run the entire chair through my sewing machine. So what I came up with is a way to sew it by hand, but in a way that will match up with the other stitches we've already made. I am taking just the preformed leather, and with a needle with no thread, I am pre-sewing the leather. That way I can go back through with my stitching awl and sew it up by hand. And what I'm hoping this does, it gives me a nice, even, consistent stitch length, and also matches up with the other stitches we've done through the machine. This is one of the parts of the project where it is just going to be a laborious process, and there is no way to avoid it. I am using a speed awl, which allows me to stitch quite a bit faster than if I was just using two needles by hand, but it's still just really tedious work. And it's times like this that I really appreciate the level of craftsmanship and work that went into pieces like this, before they had the specialty equipment and the automated equipment we have today. Now, I love making these videos because I had to learn a lot of these tips and tricks the hard way, so I want to pass along what I know to anyone who might be working through a similar project. And if you enjoy these videos and like watching the amount of work that goes into these projects, please consider interacting with the channel in some way. If you can subscribe, comment, like, share, anything you can do would really help me out and allow me to keep making these videos for folks like you to enjoy. Okay, now that all of the leather work is done, I can now finally start to put this chair back together. I mean, just look at those nice, hefty brass accents. And in case you are wondering, this is not a light chair. This is one heavy piece of furniture. Now, this chair has come a long way, but there's just one last thing nagging at me. The original leather has this dark, rich, antique patina, while this new leather looks just a bit too, well, new. Not to mention the liner leather I used is a different shade than the reddish hue of the bridle leather. So what I'm going to do is take some of this dark brown Phoebing's leather dye, diluted with acetone in my airbrush, and I'm just going to start gradually building up coats on this chair to make it all match together, as well as I'm going to intentionally hit some areas more than others to produce some unevenness and make the leather feel a little more weathered like it should, like you'd expect to see on a 125-year-old chair. Now, this was a really fun project, as it forced me to use multiple disciplines, and the transformation from where it was when found is nothing short of remarkable. If you stuck around till the end, let me know in the comments how you think I did, and subscribe for more.